Hey guys, this is Lisa from My Copper Life, and I'm going to show y'all how I made this gorgeous pendant. The materials I used for this project are as follows: 20 gauge wire, 26 gauge wire, round nose pliers, bent chain nose pliers, chain nose pliers, flush cutters, 22-inch silver snake chain, 6 by 3 centimeter green turquoise stone, and a metric ruler. Now I'll show you how I created this pendant. For this project, I need 20 gauge silver wire, or in this case, this is copper wire that's silver plated with anti-tarnish resistant coating on it. You can use any color or metal to make this project. I just chose to use the silver plated copper wire. I'm going to need 55 centimeters of this wire, and I will cut 6 pieces total. Now I'm going to take one of those 20 gauge wires and put it through the pre-drilled hole of this stone and center it on the wire as best I can, and then bend those wires upward like I'm showing here. Now we're going to take that and put this off to the side and get ready to get the 26 gauge copper wire. This is silver plated anti-tarnish again. And I'm going to just grab a piece. I usually do probably about 20 centimeters of wire here, and then cut that off. Now I'm going to grab the 520 gauge wires that I had left and have them all side by side, nice and as flat as possible. And then taking the 26 gauge wire, I am going to put that between the first and second base wire, and then wrap it once around that first base wire. What would be helpful is to splay the wires apart while you're doing this, so you'll see me doing that right here. I separate them all out, kind of pushing the outer ones out further, just giving yourself space to get the weaving wire between the base wires. So now I'm going to take this wire, come up between the second and third base wire, and then going down between the first and second base wire. And there you can see that I've got the wire going around the first and second base wire. Oops, and that's what happens when Lisa doesn't hold on to the tail end of her weaving wire. So make sure you hold on to that tail end. Now you're going to take your weaving wire and go up between the third and fourth base wire and come down between your second and third base wire. And then you're going to go up between your fourth and fifth base wire, back down between your third and fourth base wire, and then back up around the top of the fifth base wire, and then back down between the fourth and fifth base wire. And now you've got all 5 base wires wrapped with one single wrap. Now I'm taking my weaving wire and I'm going to wrap all 5 base wires. And here's a close-up of that, the beginning of this weave. So now we're just going to repeat that whole process with the 5 going around each base wire, and then around all 5 base wires. So wrapping around the first base wire, then wrapping around the second base wire, now the third base wire, making sure to push them all back, wrapping around the fourth base wire, and then wrapping around the fifth base wire. And here I'll show you a close-up of what we've done so far. There you go. It's kind of hard to see, but there it is. And now I'm going to take it and wrap all 5 base wires again. And then we're going to repeat this process until I run out of wire in my case, but usually it depends on the size of your stone. But for this particular stone, I do about a 1/2 inch of weaving to tie all these base wires together. Okay, now that I've got it done and weaved, I'm going to cut the ends of my weaving wire as close as I can to the base wires there. And you make sure you end your weave under or on the back side of your weave so that that side is facing the stone. Now I'm going to take my weave and base wires and form it to kind of go along with the contour of my stone, trying to center that weave at the base of the stone. Now we're taking those wires and we're going to pull them up around either side of the stone. I try to keep it flat on the surface as much as possible to start with because that helps kind of get it around the stone easier. Okay, so the wire that's coming through the drilled section of the stone needs to be placed between the second and third base wires of the wires that we just wrapped around the stone. And then that top portion will now have 6 base wires as we continue on to the top of the stone. So now you're going to take all of the base wires on each side, trying to keep them flat as you can up against each other, and push them all together in the center, kind of forming this little triangle. And then you're going to take some 26 gauge wire and wrap them all together, keeping them as flat as possible up against each other. This is hard to do with round wire because they're very slippery. It's much easier to do with square wire. So if you have square wire, that's the best way to do it. But it can be done with round wire. It's just a bit more difficult to do. So now the stone is wrapped in there, kind of holding snug in the wire. And now we're ready to move on to the next step. So we're gonna now grab the 2 frontmost base wires and pull those forward. Like so. And then we're gonna grab the second set of base wires and pull those forward as well. There we go. And then we're going to separate the left ones to the left and the right ones to the right. And then we're going to grab our 3rd base wires, which came through the drilled section of our stone, and this is going to make our bail. Now we're going to separate the last 6 wires, pulling 3 to the left and 3 to the right. Now we're going to get our 26 gauge wire and start weaving, going around the first base wire, so going down between the first and second base wire. And then wrapping up toward the top of the second wire and then down through the second and first wire. Making sure you pull tight here. Make sure there's no slack in your wire. The first part is always a little tricky. Getting it nice and tight. And now we're going to take that and wrap it around both base wires. So a similar weave we did with the bottom of the stone. Now we're going to go back up between the first and second base wire, around both wires, and then back down over that second wire, in between the first and second wires, then back around the top of the second wire, and over both wires. And again, back up between the second and first and second base wires, all the way around the back, and then down between the first and second base wires, and then over the top of the second base wire, and then back down over both base wires, back up between the first and second base wires, around over the top of the second wire, back down between the first and second base wires, back over the top of both base wires. And then this just continues on. And here is a close-up of the weave so far. And I'm going to continue this for about an inch or so, big enough to make my bail. Okay, so now we're going to take that woven wire and we're going to bend it back toward the back of the pendant, and then bringing those wires through to the front of the pendant, through the frame, and kind of shaping the bail, and then taking those wires and split them apart and wrap them around the frame, each side of the frame toward the back. And once they're toward the back, you're going to want to cut those wires down, leaving enough to bend back into the frame. So I'm going to cut both of those. And now I'm going to bend it in toward the frame there. And then smoosh that wire down in there. And repeat on the other side when this side is done. And there you go. The bail is now secure. Now you're going to adjust and snip off the ends of the weaving wire. I should have snipped it off before I folded the bail down. Makes it a little bit easier, but it doesn't really matter. Now we're going to take the 4 wires that were closest to the front and push them together, lining them up. And then I'm just going to twist it around, keeping the wires flat side by side over the top of the bail, making a loop. And now I'm going to kind of flatten it out, making sure my wires are all lined up together. And then I'm taking the rest of the wire and just bending it around toward the back until I meet the 3 wires there on the side. And then I'm going to pull those around the front, and then the 4 wires around with the other 3 wires. And then taking the last 3 wires and pull them around over the top. And then I'm going to pull all of the wires around the back and all the way back to the front. Then I'm going to separate the bottom 6 wires and then make the top 4 wires go to the back. Cut off enough to tuck those wires back into the frame like we did with the bail. So I'm going to bend those in toward the back of the pendant and then smush those wires down with the chain nose pliers. Now with the remaining 6 wires, I cut them a little shorter. And then now I'm going to do a swirl with these. So as best as I can, keeping all 6 of those wires snugged up close to each other without overlapping each other. I'm going to make a little loop here on top of the front of the bale there. And then come all the way back down. And now I'm just going to get all my wires situated so that I can pull them toward the back. And I like to do it one at a time when I get this far down because it's hard to keep them all laying perfectly side by side. Now I'll get them all lined up, and then I will then cut these down so I can also bend them over and tuck them in underneath there behind the pendant. Gets a little bit more difficult as we get lower because there's not much room in here, but it can be done with a little time and a little patience. And there we go. So now we've got our design pretty much finished there. Now it's time to make sure that this stone does not just fall out. So I'm going to take that first wire closest to that weave at the bottom of the stone and pull it in over the top of the stone at the bottom there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just pull that in as gently as possible so you don't nick your wire. And then just kind of adjust to make them look even. And now we're going to do the same thing on the back side. So we're kind of just trapping that stone in. The stone itself is mostly secured in there through the drilled hole, but the bottom part can swing out, so we're preventing that from happening. Now I'm going to take about the middle of the wire and pull it in on both sides. And then kind of shaping that to look nice and even. And then make sure everything's good and adjusted and where I want it. And we're getting close. So now we're going to take some 26 gauge wire and we're just going to wrap these two wires together just to make sure it's secure because it's 20 gauge wire and it can bend or move or get caught on things. So this is just one way to secure it a little bit better. And so I wrap single wraps around the first wire, and now I'm wrapping both the wires together with 2 wraps. And then I do a single wrap 3 times around the second wire. So 3 wraps around the first wire, 2 wraps around both wires, 3 wraps around the second wire. And then making sure it's all tight. And then I'll cut those little ends off nice and close. Making sure there is no little snagglies that will snag on sweaters and anything else. So you want to make sure there's nothing sticking out when you cut those off. And there it is up close. Now we're going to secure the side. So we're going to take that 26 gauge wire and put it under all 5 of these wires over here above where the drilled hole is. And then we're going to wrap around all 5 of those wires. There's 1 wrap. 2, 3. Now we're going to take it and wrap it to the one that we had already wrapped the back, and we're going to wrap around that 3 times. this will kind of tie that end wire off. You don't want to just wrap it around a bunch of wires and then not tie it to a wire. It's not as secure that way. So now we're going to take the other end of the wire and secure that side by wrapping around the frontmost wire in the front of the pendant 3 times. And then now snip off that wire as close as possible, ensuring there's no sharp bits to catch on anything. And now we're going to do the other side the same as we did the first side, so we're not going to show you that again, but you get the picture. And there it is, both sides are done, and that stone is in there secure. And now we just need to complete the pendant by adding the chain. And once this is done, you have your finished product. This stone is an apple green turquoise stone, and it's just gorgeous. I just had to do something with it, so here it is. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me create this piece. Next week will be my birthday, so I'll see you then. Bye for now.